This is by far one of the most requested tools I've had to review on the channel, the Ryobi track saw. I'm going to answer 20 of the most common questions I got. I actually got over 100. These are the top 20. My name is Matt. This is 731 Woodworks. Hit that subscribe button. Let's go. And full disclosure, Ryobi sent me this to try out, but I'm not sure they'll send me anything else after this. All right, when you get your Ryobi track saw, you're gonna get the saw itself, you're gonna get a 40-tooth blade, you're gonna get a riving knife, a battery, a charger, and 2 tracks that are about 27.5 inches long that connect together to make a 25-inch track. You're also gonna get 1 track clamp. I'm not sure why we couldn't get 2 in the package. It kind of seems silly since you need to clamp down both sides, but that's what you get. I've got an 1 7/8 inch thick piece of walnut. We're gonna see how powerful this is, if it bogs down. I had a few people ask about that. Specifically, Austin Boynton wanted to know how it performed on thicker woods. And Graham Good wanted to know how it performed on a regular battery versus the high output battery. So we got a high output battery in there. We'll make that cut. Then I'll change the batteries to a regular 4 amp hour battery that's not high output to finish the cut, see how each one performs. All right, so how did it perform on cutting that walnut? Well, the high performance battery performed well. I thought it powered through pretty good. You could hear it bogging down, and it was much more of a drain or pull on the saw than the Milwaukee was, even the Festool or the Craig or Win when I used those. It struggled a little more getting through that, but it did fine as long as you took your time. Now, when I put the regular battery in there, it cut for about 18 inches and then stopped. It just gave up. It was like, oh, it's too much. So I had to back it up a little bit, start over, and finish the cut. So you definitely want to use that high output battery, so that answers those 2 questions. So I had multiple people ask me about the track, how straight it was, if you could get it straight, and that may have been a problem for some people. Philip Tenezaf, Jason Dorsett, and Josh Genitow from either Instagram or YouTube asked the question, and yes, you can get it straight. What I did was take a straight edge, hold it against the side, and then tighten down those strips. Once you do that, it's straight and seamless. While you can feel when you're pushing where the saw goes over the track, it's not the track itself that's not lining up, it's the rubber strips that it's running on. There's a little bump. It's very minor, but it's there, but it doesn't seem to cause any issues like when I was cutting plywood or anything like that. Both Wes Jesmoins and Jay Cunningham, sorry if I pronounced your names wrong, on Instagram, both said they enjoyed the shorter tracks because they actually use that to cut shorter pieces, like half of a sheet of plywood, so like a 2 foot by 4 foot piece. They use that quite a bit, and I can see that being useful in a small shop. And you can join them together when you need those 55 inches. And we all know the 55 inches isn't enough to rip a full sheet of plywood, so you would need to pick up 2 more tracks, or maybe 1 track bundle, because they come in 27.5 inch 2 packs. Then you would have to connect 4 tracks together to get a full 8 foot rip. Now, would you be able to get all 4 of those perfectly straight? I really have a hard time believing that it would be exact like you would if you had just 2 tracks from, say, Craig or Festool or Milwaukee or any of the other competitors. But if you're mainly ripping short stock, in other words, 4 foot strips of plywood across the grain, breaking down your plywood, or shorter strips like those 2, then this may be the saw for you. So why did Ryobi decide to go with 2 27.5 inch tracks to make 1 55 inch track? I actually think it had something to do with this. This is just my theory, and I have 0 information to back it up. But I think they wanted something that they could put inside the store, in other words, in retail, aka Home Depot, that was in a box that people could just grab, take it to the checkout, check it out, and go. And they would have their whole track saw kit in 1 box. I think that cuts down on the extra box for the track, and it keeps everything nice and secure in 1 package. I know some other manufacturers have had trouble with their tracks getting damaged in shipping. This keeps everything nicely packed in that styrofoam. That's just my theory, and I think it's probably a good one. And that Jim O'Donnell asked about the riving knife on this saw. Now, this saw has a riving knife, and that's a good thing because the Milwaukee has a riving knife and the Craig has a riving knife. Several models have that feature so that you don't get the wood to pinch, and it prevents kickback, right? The only problem with this one is, yeah, it does take away from the saw, because when you plunge with it, the way the riving knife is designed into this saw, it's under the blade, so you can't plunge cut with it there. And in the manual, it actually tells you to take it off if you want to do a pocket cut, I believe is the way they called it. This is poorly designed in my opinion. It shouldn't get in the way. As a matter of fact, it got in the way a couple of times with me on the walnut and on the plywood, because you have to get the track back far enough so that you can go ahead and plunge and then go. But yeah, it could be better. it can be much better. But I am glad that there is a riving knife to prevent that kickback. If you notice on the Milwaukee, whenever you go to plunge, the riving knife is moving separate from the blade. It's a separate action. It comes out and under, so you can plunge from just using this, where the Ryobi, the riving knife comes out first, and that's going to prevent you from plunging with the riving knife in there. It's just a poor design. I don't care for that. I think that should have been better. Again, I'm glad it's there, but I wish it was further back or designed much more like the Milwaukee. Enderbiggs 1515 wants to know, what does the dust collection look like? Well, it's just okay. This does not come with a dust bag, which kind of surprised me because all of the other ones, as far as I remember, come with some sort of dust bag. This didn't. So you're just got to connect it to a shop vac, and that's where it just doesn't connect to any standard size. It's kind of its own thing. The Festool hose barely fits in there. Any shop vac hose that you're going to get, you're going to need to find some adapter to fit there. It just should have been a standard size port, much like on the Festool, Milwaukee, Craig. All of those have basically standard size ports. But as far as dust collection goes, it's okay. It's not great. Even one of the main things I add to all of my track saws are these dust covers from Woodworks. I love his products. They all fit really well. He did send me this, full disclosure, but this is one of those things that will significantly improve your dust collection. It definitely does on the Festool and the Milwaukee. It helps a lot. On this one, it helped a little, but not as much. I just think some way that this dust is coming in there, it's just getting bound up. And if you look at the dust port here, it's much thinner. And if you feel in there, there's a very, very tiny sliver where the dust is coming from. So it's getting constricted right here at the top, where these Festool and Milwaukee both have a clear, nice hole there that's pulling more air through. So in other words, you're getting more airflow through these other saws versus this one. So the dust collection is mediocre. Mello on Instagram and Josh Sorlin on YouTube wanted to know, both of them wanted to know, is this a significant upgrade over the Wind track saw? Mello was asking for a friend. I really don't think so. The only thing you're getting over the Wind is the cordless ability. If that matters to you, that's really the only upgrade that I personally see versus the two saws. Both Adler Alex and Woodcock's Custom Furniture wanted to know about the accuracy and is there any deflection? Deflection, absolutely. You can see in this clip that when you put minor pressure on, the whole saw flexes from the base, and where the Milwaukee doesn't do that. The Festool doesn't do that. But this one, just a little bit of pressure and you can see that flex. Does that matter? Yeah, it starts showing up, and where that is on thicker pieces of wood. On plywood, it didn't matter at all. The whole cut was square. It's a nice cut. So if you're only breaking down sheet goods with this, you'll be fine. But if you start cutting bigger, thicker material like this walnut you can see here, it's very out of square. And I checked the square of this saw to make sure that the blade was square to the base. And now that I've cut the walnut, you can see that it's really out of square. You're not gonna be able to do any precision work with thicker materials like this unless you somehow keep that from flexing. And I don't know how you would do that. Kyle Ludile wanted to know, I like that name. Wanted to know, are these tracks compatible with any other track saw, or is the Ryobi track saw compatible with other tracks? No, it's a proprietary track. And I think really, I wish they would have went with the more standard track like Milwaukee, Festool, Makita, PowerTech. All those use the same track system, or at least the same layout, so you can use the saw on that track. I wish Ryobi would have done that too and not went proprietary. At Fat Hammer Woodworking on Instagram wanted to know about Kickback. The potential of Kickback on this. I think with the riving knife in there, you shouldn't have any trouble because it's preventing that wood from being pinched on there. Really the only time I think you're gonna notice that is if you try to plunge cut with it without the riving knife into really hard woods. Softwoods, plywoods, you should be fine if you take your time. At Rowers Woodworking and XLR8 wanted to know how it compares to the Milwaukee track saw. I would compare it like this, night and day. It's a night and day difference between the two as far as build quality, cut quality, and price. That's one of the things you've got to understand when you're getting into these track saws. A more budget-friendly track saw, you're gonna give up a lot. And that doesn't matter if you're looking at the Wind or this or one of the other budget options. When you step into the Milwaukee, this is very similar to the Festool, and I rate them very similarly. It's very close between the two as far as quality goes, and so you're really gonna give up that trade of quality and precision whenever you decide to go with Ryobi versus something more higher end. JLags1223 and my Mr. Blessed Nest wanted to know how it compared to the Craig. I think this is below the Craig. I think the Craig is a better option for most people, and we'll talk about who this is for in a minute, but I really think the Craig is a solid middle ground for a track saw. It's not overly expensive like Festool, Milwaukee, Mafel, those types, but it's also not so expensive that it's out of the reach for most people. I was very impressed with the Craig. It has a lot of features going for it. It's not perfect, but it's a really good option if you're looking for a track saw within a reasonable budget. All right, a couple different questions on, is this worth the money if it's for brand loyalty? KB wanted to know, he's already in the Ryobi platform. And then DIY Baller had something similar. He said, any reason not to buy this if you're already on the Ryobi platform? If you already have Ryobi batteries, and if all you're going to do is break down sheet goods, and you need to just make them smaller, that's basically what I think this track saw is for. I really don't think this is a good option for cutting thick stock or cutting really thick 45-degree angles. I just think there's too much deflection in there to get any really accurate results. If you're looking for accuracy and precision, I think you need to really start considering Craig at a minimum, and then also maybe the Festool or Milwaukee brand, Mafel, even Makita. Those types are much, much better built for precision than this, in my opinion. Mr. Brett Lamke had a few questions, one of which was, what is this best for DIY or pro? I'm really thinking this is a DIY tool. In other words, for hobbyists, somebody who's, like I said, breaking down sheet goods. A professional or someone who's making a lot of cuts with the track saw is gonna wanna look somewhere else, in my opinion, on this version 1 of their track saw. Mr. Brett also wanted to know, is the blade change easy? Yes, it's very easy. Does it have a carrying case? No, it does not. And most all track saws come with some type of case that I've seen. Craig had a bag. Milwaukee has a pack out box that you can get with it with certain kits. Festool has a sustainer. So you got different ones that have different carry options. This doesn't have that. Mr. Brett also wanted to know what the warranty was on this, and it's a 3-year warranty on all their 18-volt tools. Doug Birnbaum did ask a really valid question. Are track saws replacing table saws? No, they're not. I think there's some things that a track saw can do better than a table saw, and then there's a lot of things a table saw can do much easier and better and faster than a track saw. So it's just really depending on what you're cutting. David Nivens asked how sturdy it was on 45-degree cuts, and we'll go a little further and check the accuracy and depth of cut as well as power. Cutting on a 45, it does have that anti-tip feature, which I do appreciate. You can activate that just by twisting this little knob, and that'll keep it from falling off the track. Not all track saws have that. So that's a good feature to have. Now, where this is limited is power. It struggles to cut through regular pine at 45. In other words, a full depth cut with a large surface, or as much surface as that blade can cut, it was bogging down pretty good. And if you'll notice, right here, it's not going all the way through. It's like a millimeter or less, like it should have come through, but it just didn't have enough cut depth. I tried a couple of different times to make sure I had full depth, that I was getting everything it had. Giving her all she's got, Captain.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain!
And she just didn't have it.
All she's got isn't good enough!
So she couldn't plunge all the way through there. And it's just, as far as the accuracy though, it was more accurate at 45 through this than it was at 90 through the Walnut. So it's got that going for it. So if you're cutting thinner stock than a 2x, you should be all right as far as accuracy goes. A couple of questions that I kind of think need answering here is they left off the splinter guard on this for some reason, and I'd like to know why. I don't know why. The Milwaukee has it, Craig has it, Festool, several other models have this drop down splinter guard, and that really does help reduce the tear out and things like that. I really like that, and I also think it probably helps with dust collection a little bit because it just seals up a little bit more. I wish they would have added that here to the Ryobi. Also, the depth adjustment isn't the best to adjust. You really have to really loosen this little thumb screw off, and then it kind of sticks. It's got a spring or something in there that it's a little difficult to move and get position, and then you have to tighten the thumb screw down. Very similar to the track adjustment, where it's also a plastic thumb screw and you have to push the under knob toward the track and then tighten it up. The same thing with the anti-tip feature. You look at something like Milwaukee or Festool, when you tighten those little knobs up, they're all plastic as well, but underneath there, it kind of gives a little bit better tension. It just works a little different, and I would prefer a different way of doing that on this model. If you decide to pick up the Ryobi track saw, you're going to want to add some accessories for this track. I would recommend looking at Woodworks, as a friend of the channel as well as has his own channel. He has these attachments for your track. The green ones are to put on the ends of the track to protect them from getting damaged, whether that be in storage or use. He also has an attachment that will basically give your hose a way to be protected from the edge of the track so it doesn't get tore up. And he has a dust port cover and track racks if you want to attach that to a wall or garage door or anything like that. Check him out, link in the description. I was asked if this had a scoring feature. Yes, it does. You can flip the little switch, toggle switch on top to score. It'll drop barely below the track surface. That way you'll be able to make your scoring cut on plywood, things like that, to help minimize tear out. Old Red Eye 4 probably had the most important question of the day. How do you pronounce Ryobi? Is it Ryobi or Ryobi? Well, I say Ryobi, obviously, but the company Ryobi pronounces it Ryobi. Let me know how you pronounce it. So who's buying this Ryobi track saw? Do I think it's just terrible? No, I think it has a specific purpose for a specific niche, and that would be basically breaking down plywood on cross cuts. If you added 2 more tracks to this, then you have to start thinking about, is it going to stay straight over the connection of 4 tracks? I would probably say I wouldn't want to do that. Now, I'm not saying it won't be straight. I'm saying I would prefer not to do that. 2 tracks, yeah. 4, just too much room for error there for me. However, if you're already in the Ryobi platform with the batteries, especially the high output batteries, you really need the high output for this, and you're just gonna make a few cuts to break down sheet goods, things like that, this saw will do just fine for you. However, if you're gonna start making precision cuts, deep cuts on thicker woods, and if you're wanting to do more 45-degree cuts on 1.5" thick stock, then I really would recommend you look at something like the Craig, which I have a video on already. It'll be linked at the end of this video. I just think that's a better option for most people, especially if you're just doing woodworking on the weekend, or you just want to add a track saw to the shop, but you actually intend to use it for more precision work. And of course, Festool Milwaukee are excellent options as well, and I've got videos on all of those. Now please understand, I'm not meaning this to be a bash fest on Ryobi. I really like their tools so far. I did the Hater's Guide to Ryobi, and I was impressed with the quality of what I got in the kit that I got. It was drills, drivers, things like that. Again, Ryobi sent me this track saw, and as you can tell by the video, they had 0 direction on how I talked about it or what I did. I think this is meant for that niche market we've discussed. But this could have been so much better. They were so close. And if they do a couple of things in version 2, this will be one of the top contenders as far as the mid-tier track saws go. Even keeping their proprietary track, which I don't care for, but it is what it is. All they have to do, 2 things. Make the base of this more structurally sound. In other words, widen this base out. Look at the Milwaukee versus this one. This base is much more narrow than the Milwaukee, which makes the Milwaukee that much more stable. And the connection points where this thing bevels is just a little too weak. If they fix that deflation, I think you'll see much more accurate cuts at 90 degrees on thicker stock. And the second thing they could do is just increase the motor power just a little bit. You can still keep the same batteries. It just needs just a little more oomph to cut through those thicker stock. If they did that, this would be one of the top contenders on the market as far as track saw goes. 2 small changes. Even if it raised the price a little bit, I think they would still have a nice tool on their hands. If you're in the market for a track saw, I highly recommend you checking out the Craig versus Win versus Festool track saw video right there. Click in the box, get you the big old virtual fist pump. Also, the Milwaukee track saw. It's pretty awesome. Check it out.